So we're going to be taking a look at Patrick Bet David today and his appearance on the Jubilee podcast. So we'll see if this we'll see if I can do this while maintaining monetization. I don't really know much about economics. I just want to showcase Patrick because Patrick is just so, his debate tactics and the way he tries to make points is, I think it's instructive because of how just dishonest and terrible he is at it. Every single time somebody brings up a point to him, it's kind of like he's one of those online recipes. I'll say, well, Patrick, you know that, I don't know, XYZ. And he goes, well, let me tell you a story. When I was 6 years old and I started my very first lemonade stand, it's like, no, this is going to have absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about. Case in point, this is from a long time ago where he talked to David Pakman.
But let me go back to the question what I'm asking. You asked me the question, are you comfortable, as long as what they do with the money?
That wasn't my question.
What was your question?
My question was, as a general principle,
yeah,
are you okay paying a little more if you get more?
Same question.
And they're talking about taxes.
In my eyes, it's the same thing. Here's why the answer is no.
Oh.
Okay. The reason why the answer is no, I love your sarcasm. The reason why the answer is no is because if I give somebody a relative $1,000,
okay,
it's the last $1,000 going to give me. I'm telling you, bro, I'm going to pay you back $1,500 in 2 years.
Yep.
Now, keep in mind that Pakman's question was like, or the hypothetical was like purposely set up to say you will get a return on investment of this, because he said, are you okay paying more if you get something out of it? And maybe it's not like, maybe your return on investment isn't monetary. It's, we contribute more in taxes and therefore like our infrastructure improves, right? That increases your quality of life, but it's not like a return on money.
Never get it back.
Okay.
2 years later, you come back to me. Hey, this time give me $5,000, but I promise you I'm going to give it back 10 grand.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Here you go. 2 years later, he comes back up. Dude, this time I'm asking for 10, but I'm changed.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I'm good, bro. Mm-hmm. Trust me.
I'm a changed man.
Give me the money.
Yeah.
So Patrick, are you okay with paying more if you get more in return? No. Why not? Because what if I don't get more in return? No, Patrick, what I said was, are you okay with paying more if you get more in return? No, because I won't get more in return. That's not the question. All right, so claim number one is incentive is the engine of capitalism. Remove it and the system fails. So I'm not really here to say boo capitalism, yay capitalism, boo socialism, yay socialism. That's not really what I'm going to do. Just for the record, I am a capitalist, and now 1,000 people just unsubbed. But what I don't defend, I think capitalism is defensible. What I think is indefensible is the status quo. And Patrick just seems to think there's basically, he says very little about the status quo. He does criticize some things, but all the legislative ideas and New Deal type of things and all the political motivations to try to make the system work better that we've come up with, Patrick just shits on every single one of them as if the status quo is okay. Although, well, I shouldn't say every single thing because Reaganomics, Patrick Bet David loves ideas like that. So there are certain areas where political intervention into the system Patrick's all for, and every single one of them is garbage.
Yeah, so I think that humans inherently want to be meaningful. They want to contribute to their communities. They want to contribute to society. When you look at depression rates, oftentimes it's people who aren't able to do anything besides laying in their bed and basically barely taking care of themselves. So I think that it's just a human intrinsic value to want to bring value to their community or grander society. Okay, so I don't think that it has to be through scarcity alone that scares people.
I'm really confused by the claim because the claim is incentive is the engine of capitalism. Remove it and the system fails. But Patrick isn't giving a case for where and when incentive has been removed for any kind of reason. I don't know. I would suspect that this is the kind of thing where it's like, well, look, if you're going to tax the rich, then people won't be able to become filthy rich. And so then you crush their dreams. And so people don't create businesses, and businesses are what actually employ people. See, it's capitalism that actually feeds people and feeds the children and all of that. I assume that's probably what he means.
To working, if that makes
I
sense.
worked for scarcity. I think there's levels to it. You have the survival folks who work for survival to pay their bills. Some work for status, some work for freedom, and some work for legacy. The folks that work 3 or 5 jobs, to pay their bills and do what they're doing, if the incentive wasn't there, they wouldn't work 3 to 5 jobs. Some of the guys that build a bigger business that solve a lot of problems.
The incentive there is either I die or I work. That's not really a system that
but
rewards merit. That's a system that pushes people into insecure positions.
Not necessarily. In many cases, we put ourselves in situations as well. But when we're
So
talking incentive,
are you saying that it's an individual failure for these single mothers that are working 3 to 4 jobs?
for some of them, it is.
Interesting.
Like, I don't understand how people think that way. Chat, why did it say that? I can be sympathetic to the idea that minimum wage isn't supposed to, like, I've heard people say minimum wage was never supposed to be a wage that allows you to buy a house and raise a family. I can be sympathetic to that, but there is literally not a single state in the United States where you can even afford rent on minimum wage working 40 hours a week. Long time ago in the early 20th century, there were a couple things that happened. One, Henry Ford was like, hey, I want to take all the extra money and give it to my employers. And the Supreme Court said, no, you owe it to the shareholders. And so that's like, 95% of all the problems we have today. And that's why people get Luigi Mangioni'd in the streets today. But another thing that happened was, thanks like in large part to FDR, we came up with this concept, and it has a name. I don't know what you called it, but we came up with this concept of, look, we should try to take care. We should try to meet the basic needs of people. So people shouldn't be worked to death to be able to live. So the implementation of the 40-hour work week and the minimum wage, which is meant to allow for people to have their basic needs met. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't know why anybody would think there's anything wrong with that. But federal minimum wage, it hasn't changed in 25 years. The people that are against minimum wage, this is like the level of psychopathy that comes with this. I've really never understood, because there are people that advocate that we should abolish the minimum wage. That means if you abolish the minimum wage, people are going to get paid less than minimum wage. Nobody can afford to be housed and eat on the current minimum wage, and they want it to go lower than that. I genuinely have absolutely no idea what these people think that would fix. I really have no idea.
I'd say that mechanics and plumbers and most people working blue collar jobs that are probably watching this video are working tirelessly day after day.
I don't
but yet
disagree.
They
I don't
still
disagree.
feel insecure positions to where they don't even know if they're going to be able to afford rent in the next 6 months.
So let me ask you.
Yeah, like what they're talking about has nothing to do with the prompt. Again, the prompt is, or Patrick's claim is, incentive is the engine of capitalism, remove it and the system fails. I mean, this guy's coming up here to say the incentive is like just to live and survive. I don't know how you remove the survival instinct of human beings. The people that want socialism aren't advocating for removing that.
Americans have a $400 to $500 emergency. They can't even afford that with the basic savings that they have. So this is not something that we should celebrate as promises of a system that gives you more if you work harder. We should say that this is something that rewards few. And I'm glad that you're an outlier that's been able to build a lot of success for yourself. I know that you're a multimillionaire. That's fantastic that you have those resources. But the thing is that cannot happen for everybody in society. It's possible for each individual to do it, but not everybody can be a millionaire. That's guaranteed.
I don't think not everybody can be a billionaire or a millionaire, but I do think people can find ways to use their time to effectively increase their market value. And I don't think many people do that. When I talk to people and they tell me, I've watched this show, I've watched every one of these shows, I've watched every one of these Netflix shows, you can use that time to increase your market.
So the pull yourself up by your bootstraps argument is just, it's one of those things that, like, it sounds nice, but it doesn't actually work. So, like, for example, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but the standard range for IQs, like average IQ runs from, it's 85 to 115, right? That's either end of the standard deviation. Well, you have a really sizable portion of the country, like 20-30% or something like that, that's below that. And so this has been studied by sociologists. It's been studied by the army too. They found that if you're in that position, you just will probably never be able to accomplish anything in your life other than being like a wage worker, right? So no, you can't just go to college and get an advanced degree. You can't learn multiple languages. Not like it's literally impossible, but it's just not going to happen, right? And so we can't change that. Our society will always have that. And worryingly, our society is actually getting kind of more complex, which maybe makes that problem even worse. And people like Patrick I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and just say that he just has no idea that that's the case. And so he wants to build up this system that is like literally designed to fail just based out of ignorance. And it's just really, I don't know, it's very unfortunate. In addition, the whole thing about, 10 or 11% of the country living below the poverty line, that we have a lot of people who are disabled in this country. So what are they supposed to do? Patrick's vision for the country says absolutely nothing for what you could do. His argument is just going to be, well, that's where you should have a family that takes care of you. Okay, but that doesn't happen for everybody. So now what do you do? Or like, what do you do with orphans? Like there's nothing in Patrick's fantasy world that says anything about what you can do with the fact that some children are orphaned. For Patrick, they got to be sent to the mines, right? The children yearn for the mines.
Do you think that capitalism is a system of merit that rewards people that are of higher merit?
I do.
Okay, so how would you say that this is a meritocracy when we have some people that are born into excessive wealth and some people that are working minimum wage jobs to provide for 3 or 4 kids? How would you say that that's a meritocratic society?
Those are two different things.
They are two different things, very unequal.
To actually be fair to Patrick, the other dude here, I don't think that's really a great claim because his criticism is on the his criticism is on the United States, not necessarily capitalism. Because if you're born, like one of the biggest predictors of lifetime success and lifetime security and all kinds of metrics is going to be how wealthy the family you were born into is, right? That's not meritocratic. But that's also not really capitalism, right? You can't say that. If we're going to say that outcomes people have in life are largely dictated by circumstances of their birth, then that's a failure of the system. That's an argument for social safety nets and redistribution and a few things like that. But the economic model, it's not really exactly, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily an argument that capitalism itself isn't meritocratic.
Cool things.
Well, no, not necessarily. The parents get credit for making responsible decisions so they can take care of their kids. The parents
so it's not
get credit.
Meritocracy, though. We're building dynasties of wealth.
Not necessarily. I didn't come from dynasties of wealth.
I know, you're an outlier. I get that individual. We're talking about systems. Capitalism is a system.
Yes, Patrick. Point to exceptions to explain the norm. Yes.
It's not an individual
it's a
testimony.
system that you get to use in your advantage. It's a system that's produced the best results than any other economical system. There's not an economical system that's produced better results than this based on the incentive.
History is a march of progress, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's wrong as well. So, I mean, take a redistribution of wealth isn't capitalism, at all. But what we've done in this country is we've used capitalism and taken wealth and invented programs like, food stamps or Social Security. Like Social Security, for example, decreased poverty among the elderly by huge amounts. I think it was like 50% or something like that. That's not capitalism. Capitalism didn't do that. And before we started doing that, old people lived very impoverished and pretty miserable lives. So, no, Patrick, capitalism didn't solve that problem. I don't know exactly where this fits, but the other thing that bothers me about Patrick and being such a, he says he defends capitalism, but he sort of pretend like they have this fawning affection for, unregulated free market capitalism, and they rail against government intervention that they think gets in the way of that. But pretty much the only thing they rail against is like taxation, right? What about, like, I could make the argument that, no, Patrick, I don't know, like, if you're a capitalist, good for you, but we don't even have that in America. We don't have free market capitalism in America. We have non-competes, right? And we have people, like the richest people in the country buy politicians, and then through, it's basically legal corruption. It's essentially a quid pro quo. And there have been studies that go over this. Our representation in this country is as low as it was hundreds of years ago when voting rights were extremely restricted. And we are technically a republic. We're not a true democracy, but it's been expanded so much. So, but that's a combination of the political system and the economic system. And yeah, like Patrick doesn't speak out against any of that. I'm sure he thinks that there's absolutely nothing wrong. Like, I think we need to get rid of Citizens United. I'm sure Patrick thinks that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Oh, why shouldn't I be able to buy a politician? Because money is free speech. Because it creates an absolutely horrible system. But the non-competes, the way the pharmaceutical companies buy the rights to a drug that was discovered with public funding, and then they absolutely rig the patent system. So every time their patent's about to expire, they change something meaningless about it so that people cannot get the drug generically for a price that people can actually afford. So I could just, like, I don't know, if I were to talk to Patrick, I would say, well, Patrick, that's cool that you're a capitalist, but we don't even have capitalism in America. And so I'm confused why you defend the status quo so much. I'm happy to announce that I can now offer signed copies of both of my books. This is because I've reopened my merch store where you can get your very own Spanky, t-shirt, and more. If you don't know, Rational Answers to Stupid Questions is a collection of responses to about 100 of the most common anti-scientific tropes. The book is meticulously detailed, it's been fact-checked by real scientists, and it's written in a clear and easy to understand way. Evolution, the Big Bang, creationism, flat Earth, all of that plus more is in there. Facts That Aren't True is a collection of over 150 commonly held beliefs that are not true. Each claim has a story behind it. You'll learn the history behind the claim, the science that disproves it or partially supports it in some cases, and lots of side stories and tangents. Categories include the human body, history, religion, animals, nature, language, and a hodgepodge of miscellaneous facts that aren't true. So if you want to be equipped to handle the misinformation that you see me tackling here every day, get a copy of one or both of those books for yourself. Thank you.
How much would you pay for a life-saving treatment for yourself or one of your family members?
How much would I pay for it?
Say you have cancer and you have an 80% survival rate.
Right. This is actually an extremely good argument to use. Like the way insulin in this country costs 20, 50, 100 times more than it does in other countries. Now you could make the argument that healthcare just should be a right that is completely socialized, or you could just make the argument that we can have free market, medical care or whatever, when you have, you're out of network. So, you were taken to the ER because you had a heart attack and you were unconscious the whole time, but oopsie daisy, they took you to the wrong hospital and it wasn't in network. And now you're $300,000 in medical debt and you'll never escape that. Where's the meritocracy in that? How is that capitalism doing, providing any good for the world? Or you could look at it that way, or you could just look at, I kind of already talked about the patent rigging and all of that. You can just perpetually price gouge. A bottle of water goes up to $100 a bottle during a hurricane because of the need and the desperation in the situation. Well, you always need to be healthy and you always need to be alive. And the way that's been captured and the parasitic nature of it in this country is just, it's indefensible.
With chemotherapy and less than 10% without it, how much would you pay? Whatever it takes, right?
Sure.
That's a situation of inelastic demand, when the amount that you're willing to pay is not based on the value of the service, because your life does not have a finite value. In the US, 66.5% of all bankruptcies are because of medical debt. In most other developed nations, that number is way lower, if not zero. And at the same time, the US does not have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. We pay over $13,000 per capita. Meanwhile, Taiwan, which by most metrics has the best healthcare system and a national healthcare service, only pays about $2,500 per capita per year.
So what does that tell you?
That tells us
that's wasted expenditure.
Yes, that is a massively wasted expenditure.
Yeah, so the system, which is capitalistic, is inefficient.
So that tells you the government doesn't know how to spend our money.
No,
They keep
No, Patrick, the government was never introduced into the formula here. Like, what are you doing? Chat, what is it doing?
Yes, I'm talking specifically about healthcare and certain other markets
You
where
ever
there's
heard
a
of Home
natural...
Depot? You ever heard of Home Depot?
Yes, I'm aware.
So one of the guys who's the founders of Home Depot, investors of Home Depot, his name is Ken Langone. His father died at 62 years old. Ken Langone today is roughly 90 years old, give or take. When he died at 62 years old, he tells the story that if there...
Is this going to be one of Patrick's completely irrelevant life stories? He's like, Patrick he gives off this vibe of like a guy that comes to your school as a motivational speaker, but is just so incredibly bad at it.
There was a simple thing as blood thinners, his father would have lived to be 90 years old just like he is today.
Yes, that makes sense.
Came because of innovation, which he's been on for many years. My dad's been on blood thinners for the last 4 years. So
I think
the
you're
incentive to create a
conflating
solution-
two things right
Hasn't like literally every single new drug molecule discovered in the last 20 years been discovered through public funding? I mean, again, it's just Patrick just kind of lives in this fantasy where a corporation makes all this money and they use it to do R&D and all this stuff. It's like, no, look at the catastrophic failing of Boeing and look at the parasitic nature of these pharmaceutical companies. They both just, they don't do the R&D anymore. The only research they do, and banking would be another one, the only research they do is, look, if we just avoid our commitments and if we just break the law and we do all this other stuff, how much are we going to get sued for? $10 billion? Okay, but we're going to profit $50 billion. Okay, so we're just going to do all that stuff. We're going to buy back our own stock instead of making good quality products. Yeah, Patrick, in your fantasy world where good people do good things for good reasons, sure, but that's not the world that we live in. And again, I'm not advocating to like switch to a different kind of economic system. I'm just saying that the status quo isn't working, and he never, ever rails against the status quo because he lives in a fantasy world.
If it's better in other places than it is here, why are Americans and others not going there? Why are people coming here? It's very basic.
How much does a plane ticket cost?
No, they have the money to go to different places. They don't, because they know America is the greatest country in the world. They know it. Appreciate
Nice
you.
to meet you, by the way.
I have heard, I don't know how true these are, but I have heard stories of people literally flying to a different country to get an operation and then flying back because they can't afford it in this country. So when the guest was talking about healthcare, Patrick, that's the kind of example you'd want to use. This chick's really smart, so I want to listen to what she has to say.
What's your name?
Zena.
Zena.
Awesome. So this claim about incentive
Girl of the
is one that
21st
we see
century.
often promoted by capitalism enjoyers, right? And it's this idea that profit incentives is the only thing that can make humans do things, get up out of bed every day, which has never been the case historically.
No, wait, that was Xenon, girl of the 21st century, right? I'm showing my age.
Historically, it's not the case. Psychologically,
Historically, it's never been the case?
No,
What
I
has
mean,
been the case?
so we've seen
What's
that-
been the incentive?
the incentive is intrinsic motivation. Passion.
Intrinsic motivation?
Of course. Have you ever heard of intrinsic motivation?
Of course I have. So you
Okay.
think people going to go...
No, Patrick, I don't think you have because you seemed like sort of incredulous when she brought it up.
will just do anything for no incentives?
The incentive is intrinsic, meaning passion, interest, and honing your skills.
Whether you get paid or not.
Well, the problem is that we're forcing people to, need to, work to survive.
So
in
what's the alternative? So give me another solution, another
may I
economical
finish
system.
talking?
Yeah, actually,
Right,
I'm
awesome.
curious.
So
He seems like really threatened and insecure with her.
yeah, psychological theory of self-determination is widely accepted in psychology. It basically explains that intrinsic motivation and passion is actually what predicts incentive. You're arguing that incentive is integral to profit-driven motivation. That's not true. Extrinsic motivation, at all times, at every single case, is going to predict less creativity, less motivation, less skill, etc. Intrinsic motivation is what causes things like technological development. Some of the greatest breakthroughs have been from people who are devoted in honing their skill.
So should they get paid?
Yeah, so I probably agree with almost everything she's saying. Patrick's idea of this whole incentive thing and why capitalism works is you get the one guy, and the one guy wants to own a Lamborghini. So he works incredibly hard so he can be rich enough to own a Lamborghini. And he has a business and he employs people. Now, his other employees, they're not going to have Lamborghinis, but they are going to have Ford Mustangs. And that's just such a good system. And it's like, no, Patrick, that's like literally not how it ends up working. First of all, it's more like, if we wanted to be more accurate, the guy owns a Lamborghini and his employees can only afford used cars. That's pretty much how what is the CEO to regular employee pay ratio in America? It's right around 400 to 1, whereas in the other countries that are like the other G7 countries, it's like 20 to 30 to 1 for them. And this could go back to Patrick's question about, well, why are people flocking to America? Well, they're not flocking here to get rich. You can make the argument that they're coming here because the economic system kind of allows you, I could be sympathetic to the idea that they think it's just sort of a, how do I want to say it? There's a low barrier, like the entry point or whatever you want to call it is easy in America, but they're not thinking about getting rich. They're coming here because they live in either economic or safety reasons, they live in peril and they want to come to a country that's relatively safe compared to a lot of other countries and is doing well financially. And we're going to have to gloss over how a lot of that is due to U.S. intervention, literally making these countries unlivable throughout the 20th century. The other thing about what she's saying, though, and this is the argument that people who are against a universal basic income will come up with. They'll say, well, if you provide for people, like if you give everybody $1,000 a month or something like that, they will stop working and they'll become slobs and they'll become disinterested. And I just flat out do not believe that because we have these intrinsic motivations. So yeah, maybe there will be less or fewer people in service industry jobs, which is an enormous part of our economy. It's not exactly the greatest work. It's not the most fulfilling work, but think of the number of those people that would go, that if they have some basic income, would do something like what I do, for example, like stuff online, or maybe they would become artisans, or maybe they would just contribute to their, they could become tutors, or they could be volunteer workers in their own community. Or here's a crazy one, maybe some of them would then be able to spend more time with their children. Crazy idea, right? Because capitalism isn't necessarily providing any of those things for us.
Paid for it.
I think that we shouldn't live in a system that privately owns the means of production and forces people in this position.
What college did you go to?
USC.
You went to USC. What did you major in?
Sociology.
Sociology. Who's your hero as a professor? Who's
Wow,
the professor you look up to?
This doesn't seem like a topic
Do you know
that's
why I
related
asked
to
this question? The
capitalism.
reason why I asked
You're right, Zena.
this question is because somebody convinced you of that.
I don't
Somebody
think it's
convinced you that
so
is the
psychology
way that
and studies
produces-
convinced me of this fact
Yeah,
about
but
the human mind.
unfortunately, to your claim, results.
Yeah, like I was saying, he seems very like insecure and threatened. No, the things she's saying are like they're going at the core of what he believes. And so he has to come out and try to attack her and be like, oh, so you were brainwashed into believing that because somebody convinced you that that's how it is. Meanwhile, here you are trying to convince everybody that the other way is better. So, no, you, Patrick.
Show that the greatest
Results
economical
show that
system
intrinsic
is
motivation predicts more
capitalism
creativity
that allows
and more
people to go
profit
above and
than
beyond
anything
and
like
solve
extrinsic
every
motivation.
single issue out there. An entrepreneur who gets up, who says,
What was your
I'm
claim
gonna
again,
be-
mister?
I'm going to incentive. The
Incentive. What
entrepreneur
about
who has an
incentive?
incentive to go out there and build their lives, and you put
So
no
I'm saying that this
monetary
incentive that you're talking about,
Yeah.
what predicts the best incentive, the best drive, and the best
what
creativity
do you think about
has been
Elon
proven
Musk?
by
What do you think about
psychology.
Elon Musk?
Can we respond to my claim?
This is about incentive,
All right,
though.
awesome. So you're arguing that incentive is intrinsic and tied to extrinsic motivation. What we find is that the best incentive comes from intrinsic motivation.
So a person that's passionate about solving an issue is going to build something bigger than somebody else that's not.
Yeah, so someone who has a true passion for this.
Yeah, so
exactly.
Right. So like, I don't know. It's hard for me to come up with an example, but I'll just like pick myself. Somebody who wants to do educational outreach, right? That's their intrinsic motivation. So because they are intrinsically motivated, they go to well, here, I can actually make this super personal. When I started college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My freshman year, I got pretty much all A's and B's. My sophomore year, because I was going through this pretty bad identity moratorium, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was in a bio major because I thought about going into like physical therapy or something like that. But I really got to this point where I was like, I do not want to do that. So I largely stopped going to class. I was having to drop classes because I wasn't doing any of the work and I wasn't attending class. And my GPA it plummeted for a couple of years. And then I kind of kicked myself in the ass and said, you have to have a plan when you get done with this, right, Eric? And so I decided, I just searched within myself and I said, okay, well, I actually really like the idea of being a teacher. And I turned into an AB student after that. So my internal incentive, exactly like what she's talking about, is what actually produced the better outcome to me. Because it wasn't like college was still the same. I was having to go to classes and they were actually a lot harder because I was a junior and senior now. So they were the 300 and 400 level classes and I had even more work to do. Yet, because I now had the intrinsic motivation, I performed better. But you can take that with any teacher. They become intrinsically motivated to want to do this thing. And so they end up putting themselves in a position where they become a career successful person. Whereas if you take the external, it's actually bothering me how perfect this is. I thought about going into physical therapy because I just kind of looked it up and I was like, wow, that's like some of the most money you can make for the least amount of schooling, right? So I was like, oh yeah, that's why that's an extrinsic motivation. And it didn't work for me. And she's just saying, yes, this has been studied and we know that. So her argument isn't necessarily, and maybe this is also why it's not resonating with Patrick. Her argument isn't really, well, this is a recipe for getting crazy rich and stuff like that. But it is an argument for finding security and meaning and purpose in life. And we live in a country that is such a rat race and a keeping up with the Joneses type of thing. I can't remember who this comedian is, but there's this comedian who, I think it was probably George Carlin, but he has this bit where he's like, America is a place that sold you on the idea that forcing yourself to wake up, forcing yourself to take a shit, forcing yourself to eat, to stuff yourself with food in the morning for breakfast, forcing yourself to drive 2 hours to a destination, forcing yourself to sit behind a desk, and it goes on and on like that, is what the American dream is, or like is what happiness looks like, or something like that. And Patrick seems to think that like, yeah, that's all fine and good because that's how you get to your goals. And it's like, no, that's what people are forced to make themselves put up with, and they're largely miserable because they just have been sold or literally forced into a position where that's all they can do.
So profit motivation is not the thing that's driving innovation, right?
Of course
Psychology,
it is. Of course
so
it
psychology
is.
proves that's not the case. That profit's not the reason that we have the greatest inventions that we do today.
I don't know if I disagree with the fact that there's a passion behind it. Are you saying people with passion?
Yeah, I mean, sorry to pause so quickly, but think back to, the Renaissance era, Da Vinci and Galileo and Tycho Brahe. These are especially Da Vinci and Tycho Brahe because they were financially backstopped by incredibly wealthy people. But they were the people that they became who they were and had the interests they had that made them an excellent commodity before any of that. None of them thought, yeah, if I just like it, Da Vinci didn't sit around and be like, look, if I write in the mirror and if I study nature and if I imagine all these things, then the Borgias or whoever are going to give me an estate and all this money. That's not how it worked. Or if we think like to the modern day, what was his name? Edward Jenner, the guy that created the world's first vaccine. It was for cowpox, I think. There's also, I don't remember who this was. It wasn't Jenner. I wish I could remember this. You can hear this story for yourself. It was on the Disappearing Spoon podcast. There was this guy, I don't know who he was, but he trekked like thousands of miles on foot in South America in order to like inoculate as many people as he could. I don't remember what it may have been smallpox. I don't remember, but he was intrinsically motivated to do that. Or we can think of like an Albert Einstein, right? And I'm a science nerdy type person. So those are all the examples I can think of, but the people who literally changed the world through their science or their technology, which either just increase, or Louis Pasteur would be a great example. He wasn't doing that for money. Even Thomas Edison, like he was a ruthless competitor and kind of a dick, but the reason he was a tinkerer and an inventor was because he liked tinkering and inventing. Okay. So, she's 100%, but anyways, getting back to my point on this, this is where trickle down actually exists, in the idea that if we let people become filthy rich, they rain down, their profits or whatever to the people. That absolutely never happens. But these people that are intrinsically motivated, think of all the examples I gave and all of the technology and quality of life that spun off of that, because these people were just looking for they were just passionate about something.
Even if there wasn't the incentive to make as much money as they would make, people would still
That's
pursue
exactly
it,
what,
even with or without money.
That's what psychology
Well,
says.
your claims are wrong because
That's not true.
No. And, even if there was even a grain of truth to what Patrick Bet-David is saying here, you could throw this back at him and be like, okay, Patrick, let's say that that's true. Is this good? So what I would say to Patrick is, would you rather take your child to a pediatrician who became a pediatrician because pediatricians make a lot of money? Or would you rather take your child to a pediatrician who became a pediatrician because they want to help children? Or maybe they have like an extremely sad story, like they lost like a baby brother. Like they were like a teenager, but they had a baby brother and he died. And they said, how could this have happened? So they were motivated to become a doctor to prevent those kinds of things from happening. Patrick would pick the second option every single time. That argument gets made a lot. Like, if you take away the incentive, then blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, I would 100 times out of 100 pick the intrinsically motivated person out of the motivated for money person.
My next claim is capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system.
Ooh, I'm actually kind of sort of tempted to agree with this. Let me think about it for a second. So there's this, I had to look up this statistic because I don't remember what it was, but there's this really incredible statistic that ever since 1990, the newspaper companies or whatever could have run a headline that said 137,000 people were lifted out of extreme global poverty today. Newspapers could have run that headline every single day because since the 90s, around a billion, or like since 1990, around a billion people have been lifted out of that. And I can't remember, it's defined as something like $4 a day or something like that. But in that time, that many people have been lifted out of poverty. And so it's like, that's an extraordinary thing. It's something that almost nobody like even knows about. I learned about it by reading Steven Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now. Now, is that thanks to capitalism? Well, I think it's complicated. I think in a way, I think it couldn't have happened without it, but it definitely didn't happen because of it. So, for example, where the vast majority of these people have been lifted out of this is in sub-Saharan Africa and especially China. Now, China is, I don't know, China, like I'm not an economics person, so don't quote me as gospel on anything like this. But the way I understand China is they're very capitalistic. They call themselves a communist state, but it's basically the state just kind of dictates what they're going to invest in and where they're going to invest in. So it's very much top-down controlled in that sort of communistic sense, but it's also very capitalistic. Like the government tells them how to do their capitalism there. There are 20 cities in China that nobody's ever heard of that have 1 million people. And when you look at pictures and videos from these places, you see things like a monorail train that was built to go like literally through a skyscraper, and it all works perfectly. And the way they can engineer and build things extremely quickly is remarkable. There are some kind of not so good things like forced displacement of people that happen because of that. And so, I'm not really defending what they're doing. I'm just pointing out the fact that they can get shit done. And because of that structure, it has lifted an incredible amount of people out of poverty. But just saying that capitalism did that is just really plainly not true.
So I would argue that governments have actually lifted the most people out of poverty. If you look historically, we look at China, for instance, had...
Okay. Gabby has Stegosaurus earrings, and I just want to say that is awesome.
The most significant poverty reduction in all of human history. They pulled 800 million people out of poverty using state-owned enterprises and state centralized planning. They did work with the capitalist system, but they did it, most of it was done through state-funded infrastructure, education, and contributing to strong literacy programs, redistributing.
Yeah, she's saying everything I said, but she's more prepared for this, so that's awesome. I don't know, like for sub-Saharan Africa, that it's a different story, like kind of the way it happened, and I can't really speak all that much on it, unfortunately.
The wealth. I think that my other argument would be that there hasn't been an opportunity for alternative systems like socialism to pull enough people out of poverty. So we look at examples. There hasn't been enough opportunities for them to succeed. And so when
Why
we
do you think
say,
that is?
I think that is partly because of the U.S. and I think because capitalist forces and global market insecurities have sabotaged these attempts to do socialism. So we look at an example in.
That is like super based. Yeah, I talk about this in my book, Facts That Aren't True. The way the United Fruit Company at the time. So in Guatemala, they elected this guy, Arbenz, I believe was his name. And he was, I don't exactly remember if they claimed he was a full-blown communist. I think there's kind of disputes about that. But he set up a program where he was giving land to natives of Guatemala. I don't know if it was supposed to be like some sort of like like their version of like the Homesteaders Act or something like that. But and this has happened multiple times in Central and South America. They enact these policies that greatly reduce poverty, that greatly expand the middle class. Well, United Fruit Company, which was growing bananas there, they they owned a lot of that land, even though United Fruit Company was an American company. The detail, like, look up the story to get the details exactly right. But basically, United Fruit Company convinced the CIA to, with the help of, and the political campaign for this was backstopped by Edward Bernays, who's the father of public relations, which is to say he was like the original mastermind behind propaganda. But anyways, they convinced the CIA to go there and establish a coup, and that coup started a civil war that lasted for like 37 years, and huge numbers of people died, just so some filthy capitalists could keep growing bananas in a foreign country. And it's like, again, this is the status quo kind of thing that you never see Patrick having anything bad to say about.
Chile, in the 1960s, they elected a democratic socialist, and he proposed literacy reform, wealth redistribution, land reform, and all of that was a threat, obviously, to the United States because McCarthyism was on the rise at the time. And so instead of allowing Allende to have a chance with that, the U.S. Orchestrated a CIA-backed coup to take over and to have a military dictatorship that led the country instead of Allende, who actually was having a lot of success in reducing the poverty rates before the U.S. interfered. And so I think we look at other parts of Latin America, like Venezuela, for instance, and we see the same thing. We see that the U.S. has interfered several times. You know, with Chavez in Venezuela, he was able to reduce the poverty reduction in half in the first decade of him being in office. And he was sabotaged ultimately by the U.S. and by a military dictatorship, so that the people that replaced them were actually.
So may I respond? It's a lot of.
Yeah, like Saudi Arabia, people from Saudi Arabia were responsible for the 9/11 terrorist attack in conjunction with Osama bin Laden, obviously. Yet we keep buying their oil, and they hack journalists to pieces, and we keep buying their oil. Venezuela has never, to my knowledge, attacked or attempted to attack the United States, and they have oil, but we won't buy oil from them, and we place these embargoes on them because capitalism. So, like, literally, you can literally be a terrorist state and commit the worst act of terror in the history of the United States. I don't think Pearl Harbor counts as a terrorist attack. And we won't embargo you, and we'll buy oil from you. But if you're communist or socialist, then we'll ruin your country and we won't buy your oil. Make that make sense.
But unfortunately, socialism has had hundreds of years
in terms of
to produce results, and it hasn't worked. Do you know why it doesn't work, though?
It's been sabotaged.
It's been sabotaged, or it's because it forces people to do something they don't want to do?
Does capitalism
It's definitely been sabotaged. And yeah, she's going to ask the perfect question here.
not do the same?
No, capitalism gives
There's
you
7 million people in this country who have to work
choose.
multiple jobs just to get
I
by.
had to work multiple jobs
They're
for a season.
forced to do
Yeah.
that because either they do that or they starve. So if the options are to work or to
But-
starve,
but
that's
they-
not
but
freedom,
they-
that's economic
if you,
coercion.
If you, respectfully, if you do that for a period of your life, I understand it. If you're doing that for 30 years, you're doing something wrong. You shouldn't be working multiple jobs for the rest of your life.
So, first of all, I'm not going to argue with this moral argument. I think that people who live in poverty, especially when we look at how many people live in poverty in this country, and also it depends on how you define the poverty line, but there's 40 million Americans who live below the poverty line in this country. There's 3 guys in this country that own 40% of the wealth. How does that work in a country that is
You really
built
want to go
on...
there? You want
Sure.
to go?
Patrick would have to make the argument here that 10% of that's more, like 11% of the country lives below the poverty line. And for most of them, it's because it's their fault. They're choosing to not move up economically. And that's just, I don't know how you can hold a belief like that.
Okay, so let's talk about it. So when we talk about the rich people at the top, okay, and you say, well, the rich don't pay enough taxes. Do you know what the bottom 50% of taxpayers in America pay towards the revenue that the government gets in taxes? Do you know what the bottom 50% pays?
Tell me.
2% of taxes. Do you know what the top 1% pays?
There's been several years
Do you know
that
what the
they've
top
paid
1%?
nothing.
Do you know?
They've paid nothing
No,
in their
hang on a
federal
second.
taxes.
This is from the IRS. I'm not writing a blog from Huffington Post. This is not Daily Beast. I'm telling you the story. The top
I'll say
1%
this.
pays 42%
I'll say this, the
of
top
all
1%
tax
is
revenue.
about to pay...
Isn't that consistent with the amount of wealth that they own? The guy from the very beginning comes up, and what they do at the end is the guest makes the claim, and Patrick has to go against it. It's actually a cool little switcheroo. But he says that America was never a meritocracy. So we'll listen to the argument.
Is America has never been a meritocracy.
Okay. Tell me why.
So I think that when you see wealth disparity and the amount that it gives influences to certain individuals, specifically from a starting point, if we're looking at America like a race and someone is starting 2 inches from the finish line and somebody starting a mile back, we would not say that this is a judgment of their merit. We'd say that this is a system that allows those with the most influence to continue to be successful.
So is it about some of the people that got generated?
Right. So, for example, you can look at the horrendous income disparities between blacks and whites in this country. And the primary cause of that is because of how they were enslaved forever and couldn't accumulate generational wealth. And then even for 100 years after they were emancipated, the system was designed so that they still couldn't do that kind of thing. They were redlined. They were not beneficiaries of GI bills. They weren't allowed to buy house. Well, it's the redlining thing. When they had a booming economic system for themselves in Tulsa, it was fucking bombed with airplanes, and the goddamn police got involved in it. And so that's something you can point to, be like, well, obviously merit has nothing to do with that disparity. Now you could argue for white people in this country, there's a lot of meritocracy behind the reason why a lot of regular, ordinary, working class white Americans ended up, building portfolios for themselves. That doesn't mean that the system therefore works. Like, you can't just cherry pick a small portion over there.
Generational wealth have an advantage over others that didn't get it.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that that's a moral failure. I'm just saying when people claim that capitalism is a meritocracy, that's just factually inaccurate. And we shouldn't be allowed to lie here. Like, we should try to be coming to a common consensus.
So you're saying capitalism is a meritocracy is a lie? Okay.
Capitalism is not a meritocracy.
No.
So you mean to tell me nobody here can go out there and win if they wanted to at the highest level?
No, I think that there's a probability that people...
No. And yeah, what he's saying there, like there's a probabilistic argument you can make for it, but like literally you can't, and they do get to this, I think, in this argument here, you cannot argue that that a nurse that works in a trauma center doesn't work harder than a NFL player. Sorry, you can't make that argument. They work far harder than those people, yet the market decides that these people are worth less. So where's the meritocracy in that? And like, there's nothing wrong with personal choice. And like, yeah, we have TV, like the NFL is the biggest TV show in America. So I understand, like, I'm not saying it's like wrong or unfair that NFL players are millionaires, but I am telling you that it definitely isn't meritocratic that one is a millionaire and the other is not.
Anybody at what levels, you can have success. To me in life, there's 3 different types of people. You got overachievers, you got achievers, you got underachievers. Let me unpack this for a second. We got 10 minutes.
You can.
Overachiever, achiever, underachiever. Okay?
Again, I said this earlier, but it's like cute story, Patrick, except it's not true, because you have people that just have low IQs or are physically disabled, the elderly, like Patrick's utopian vision of how if the system is just literally designed to work completely ignores tens of millions of people for whom that system can't do anything for them. And it's just, I don't know. It's so, like, it's almost depressing.
The winning that you're talking about, quote unquote, is wealth accumulation.
Not necessarily wealth accumulation.
It is. That's exactly what you just said.
If you end up, I have friends that make $120,000 a year. They have a good life. They're happily married, got 2 kids, and they chose to go live in a place like Victorville. They chose to go live in a different place. But to me, that is winning.
It's just so incredible that Patrick is saying, oh yeah, I got a friend and he only makes $120,000 a year, but he's still winning. Patrick, that would put him in like what, the top 3 or 4 or 5% of all income earners in this country. 1/3 of the country lives paycheck to paycheck. Those are the people you should be talking about and trying to sell us that it's meritocratic and that it's working.
I just want to break this down. Do you think that there are not mutually exclusive interests in owners and workers?
Do I?
Yeah, I don't know. This is the most communist thing, or if you want to call it that I think. And which is that an employer and an employee, like their interests are diametrically opposed to each other, which is pretty strange to think about. Like, how does it work at all if that's the case? But an employer wants to employ as few people as they possibly can, pay them as little as they can possibly get away with, and make them all work as much as they possibly can. An employee wants to do the opposite of all of those things. Now, do I think that you should be able to make $100,000 a minute and work 1 minute of the year and that's the way it should work? No. We have a social contract, right? And this also goes back to what I was talking about all the way at the beginning. The social labor contract or whatever is, well, we have a 40-hour work week. In some places like Spain, France, or whatever, it's like 32, 36, or whatever it is. They have a different one. We can just stick with 40. If I work for you for 40 hours a week, and this is the minimum wage that I work, I'm doing everything that I should in order to secure my needs so I can be a productive member of society and be able to raise children, which is a necessary part of having a society too. And Patrick's just against the political system helping to establish that for whatever reason. It's just strange.
There are contradictions in the way that workers are trying to get as much wages as possible. That's just guaranteed. I want to get the maximum amount for the labor that I put into it. A owner wants to do the exact opposite. It's not that they want to pay people what they're deserved. They want to pay people what they can get away with. That's just virtually true.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case.
No, you already agree that coercion exists in the system. You're just saying that socialism. You're saying that socialism is the government mandating owners to do it. But you're saying that markets do the exact same thing. You just said that the market price determines.
Don't put words in my mouth. I like you. You're respectful. You're a nice guy. Don't put words in my mouth.
Did you not say?
So like Patrick could disagree on his own merits. Like I could see a guy, even a rich guy, but he has a really successful company, but it's not like a giga corporation or something like that. And he pays people a lot more than what he could get away with. There's like this really depressing story back when I was teaching in South Dakota. We were talking about the labor union, or the teachers union was trying to negotiate. We have paraprofessionals and they're part-time workers. And man, they were making like absolute shit wages, like $12 an hour or whatever. And they have an extremely hard job because they're working with children with severe disabilities. And they are at different sites all the time. Paraprofessionals in schools, like the work they do is really, it's really important, and they just get paid like shit. And they tried to negotiate higher wages for them because they thought they deserved it. And the school board, like they didn't do anything. And their argument was, well, we're always getting their basic argument was we don't have a labor shortage. They essentially said, people take this job for that wage, and then they just killed it right then and there. And what's actually really funny about that is that goes back to what Xena, or whatever her name was saying about the intrinsic motivator. People that are paraprofessionals that work for schools are intrinsically motivated to do a good thing. And they accept this is true for all teachers, but they accept the mediocre wages for what they do because they're trying to do the right thing. But getting back to what Patrick was talking about, I can see a guy who has a really successful business and pays his employers a lot more than what he knows he could get away with because it's a small company and he has a personal relationship with them. For these giga companies that exist in the United States, like, I don't know, like a McDonald's or whatever, that doesn't happen because it's completely impersonal. And earlier I said, here's the most communistic thing I think, or whatever. I actually don't think billionaires should exist. I think we should tax all income over 100% of income or wealth over $100 million or something like that. And because I think, like for example, you have like with healthcare, right? Why did that guy get Luigi Mangione? Well, because the system is profit motivated, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it expands into this absolute disgusting, enormous thing. And so it's very impersonal and they don't have to really care all that much about their customers who are paying their premiums every month. So you can keep denying them. And then what they start to do is the number has to go up, right? So, hey, we're super profitable, but guess what? Our shareholders need 9 more yachts. So what do? Well, they literally, like, this is public record. You can look it up. They said, look, we need to just start denying more claims. And it's not because they are going bankrupt and can't pay out all of the claims that are being made. It's because they need to chuck more money into toward the shareholders or whatever else. That doesn't work. The only reason a company can ever get to this disgusting, immoral, impersonal thing like that is for it to expand like that and for it to just siphon up all this money. And essentially what I'm saying is only a system that makes billionaires becomes a kind of thing like that. Or think of like credit card companies and all the, like, how much of your mail is junk mail? For me, 99%, right? Every single day, almost, not every single day, but every single time I go get the mail, there will be 20 things in there. Maybe one thing every couple of weeks is mail that I need to actually open.
You know what's the great thing about business and numbers and data is every idea is getting exposed. During COVID, all the policies that came out from the leftist side, they're all getting exposed today.
Name 2.
Policies that came from the leftist side during COVID, 3 times more money was given to Wall Street for bailouts than was given in stimulus checks to ordinary people. And there was a bond market crash, and then the Federal Reserve or whatever, the Treasury or whatever it is, pumped it full of cash and stopped it. And that happened under Trump. So, like, just shut the fuck up with that talking point, Patrick. The only other thing I want to say in this, and I don't remember where it gets said, but it's during this conversation with the final guest. Patrick says all this stuff about like, it's in line with what he's saying here. Oh, I can't wait for all your socialist policies or whatever to get exposed. And he brings up Social Security, and he tells all these just incredible lies. When Social Security first started, you couldn't collect benefits until 65, but life expectancy was only 61. Patrick, if you look at actuarial tables, life expectancy was that low because people died in childhood. A lot of people died in childhood. So those people were never even putting into the Social Security system in the first place. So that's a huge error for the logic here. But if you look at the actuarial tables, yeah, average life expectancy was 61, but 61-year-olds at the time were expected to live a few decades beyond that. So they were going to be in the Social Security system for a long time. Now, you can make the argument, and it's probably true, that people live within how do I want to say this? It's probably true today that people live, on average, a greater number of years during the collection phase than they did back then. but probably not by as much as you would think. And again, those people are actually living to that point, so they're paying into the Social Security system versus the childhood mortality. Don't need to rehash that again. But the other big reason for why this is irrelevant is because when people say that Social Security is becoming insolvent or going bankrupt, no, what's happening is there are projections that something like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, or whatever, the fund will be like 2/3 of what it is today. That's not bankrupt or insolvency. And the other reason, or the other thing is Social Security contributions are capped at something like only $150,000 a year for income. So if you make $1 million a year, you pay into Social Security the same amount that somebody that makes $150,000 a year does. That makes absolutely no sense. 168,600. Okay, it's my mistake. It's higher than I thought. That went on for a pretty long time. And so that's probably all the time I'm going to have for this today. So thank you for watching.